Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Home Studio Hangout podcast. Today, we have Harley Eblen with us on the podcast. Harley is a producer that specializes in string arrangements. We talk about how he found this specialized area of the industry, how you might need to rethink your view on the business aspect of music production, and some of the craziest production techniques that Harley has used on tracks. We're very excited to get into this episode, but first, a word from our sponsor. This episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast is sponsored by Bliss. Bliss is an audio development company who crafts intuitive digital audio effects and instruments. They've collaborated with artists like Jean-Michel Jarre and Jordan Rudess and have an incredible selection of over 26 different plugins for Mac, Windows, and iOS for all of my mobile producers out there. Whether you are looking for an inspiring synth like the Megalith synth, maybe some classic compressors, filters, or chorus plugins, or if you want to get out of the box with something a little more creative like the Phase Mutant, they have something for everyone. Right now, when you go to bliss.com, that's BLEASS.com, and use the code HOMESTUDIOHANGOUT, all caps, you get up to 20% off your order. Thank you to Bliss for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Now let's get back to the conversation. Welcome back to the Home Studio Hangout podcast. I am Drew, super stoked to have you back with us today. And today we're talking with Harley Eblen. Dude, how are you doing, man?
Hey, I'm good.
Dude, I'm super stoked to have you. Super stoked to get into this conversation. I feel like you are a very interesting case of a producer. Do you get that a lot, do you feel like?
Yeah, I feel like I found this really unique lane with doing string arrangements with and for music producers, kind of through failing as a music producer, but we can talk more about that in a bit.
Yeah,
but
I feel that.
It's that thing of niching down and finding the way that you are best able to support your corner of the industry that I know comes up a lot.
For sure. Well, I think the best place to start is at the beginning. So let's talk about like how you kind of got into this whole thing. Was it production first? Was it strings first? Has it always been music for you, like early on?
Yeah, so I'll kind of do a quick overview and we can zoom in on any portion that's relevant. But I like got handed a recorder in the first grade, and it felt like a scene out of a movie where like a knight was being handed a sword. Like it felt momentous to me, and everyone around me was like, why is this happening? But like being handed my first instrument, I remember it as a first grader. Our school gave us violins in third grade. We started learning. I was like, cool, but not the vibe. So I realized there was a big violin that you could sit down while playing, and my dog wouldn't run out of the room while I was practicing. That was the cello. So I started playing cello, studied classical cello, and then got interested in bluegrass and Celtic music, and then folk singer-songwriter guitar singing thing.
Very cool.
And through that, got into a studio, and I was like, how does this work? So learned production, and then full circle to bringing strings into the production. And that's kind of the arc. Had to learn all the things to be able to get here.
So did strings come first, you said, and then production, or was it kind of at the same time for you?
Yeah, so it was, I was a cellist before a producer.
Okay.
And then I quit cello, and then I was a producer before I started playing cello again. So there's not a clean answer to that. It was both and.
That's really interesting because I feel like a lot of people have like this strong, like, I was this, and then I decided I want to produce, or I was learning production, and then I picked up an instrument to better serve, whatever client that I was doing.
Yeah. And that last one was kind of it. Like I said I failed as a producer. I kept having conversations and trying to close deals, but I didn't have the portfolio and I didn't have the reputation and trust. But people saw that I was a string player, and inherently there's a threshold that you have to cross to be able to play a bowed string instrument. And so when people see that you can play one, there is more of a level of trust than like, I know how to run a DAW.
Yeah.
So
because
when
that's the internet.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But like I knew how to play the cello, and I was learning how to run a DAW. So people are like, oh, can you track cello on this thing? And I was like,
that's really cool.
Cool. Not what I expected, but let's do it. And so over time, it rolled into more and more of that.
And do you end up finding that, because I feel like I have so many questions. I feel like you did you find that you had a specific lane that you fit in, or genre wise, do you feel like you kind of get everything?
So I got super focused at first.
Okay.
I was given an idea by a mentor when I was like 20, just more in the business side of things, not even necessarily music. But when you pick a niche, you are aiming for a bullseye, and you want that bullseye to be as specific as possible. And I remember the example he gave was, don't write a blog about commuting without a car. Write a blog for commuters on unicycles in Portland that wear utility-kilts. And you aim for the bullseye, but then any dart you get on the board is a win. So I started thinking about that in terms of music, and I found a specific community on Instagram of independent indie folk musicians that were all doing a similar thing, hung out in similar places online, and they kind of coalesced around one or two blog outlets. And I was like, how do I serve those people? And I got to know every single one of them that I could and figured out how to serve them. And over time through that, it's expanded out into more and more stuff.
Wow.
But it started as being really intentional about, how do I learn to do this one thing for this one kind of person?
And I feel like that is a big takeaway from a lot of people can take, like, especially because, you know, here on the podcast, we really talk to, like, we're talking with people that are like either just getting started in their like deep music production journey, like they're kind of shifting from hobbyist to like taking it seriously, or that like earlier intermediate where they're like, I'm taking it full time, but I need to do better, or I'm like, you know, trying to transition into full time, like that kind of, you know, lower intermediate level. We talk with a lot of, that's kind of like who a lot of our listeners are. And I feel like that approach that you just said is huge for specifically those people, where it's like you're picking, you don't necessarily have to be married to that tiny, you know, bullseye of a niche the entire time, but starting out, getting started with that, you know, very small group, like you said, the strings with the kilt, like
totally.
Very, very small pocket of people, and serve them as best you can and blow their minds. Then you can start branching out, and that creates not only like, you know, brand awareness from like you, but also more likely a consistency factor from a returning client standpoint as well. Do you feel like that was pretty like your case as well?
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, I feel like the biggest, in hindsight, like I can see what things were most useful about it. But I feel like the main thing is that when you're trying to build a portfolio, when you're trying to build a brand, build a reputation, you can't show that you are trustworthy to everyone. But if you can prove yourself and go above and beyond to one person, and they have a circle around them that they can tell that you are trustworthy, then you get access to that circle. And then once you are able to prove your trustworthiness and ability to actually deliver on what you say you can deliver on to a group of people, you're now a part of that group. You're not an outsider anymore. So I got to become a part of the community in a very real way. Like, I've gotten to hang out with a lot of these people in person now, even though they're all over the world. Like, I've been able to travel and meet people, but that being perceived as a part of an in-group and trustworthy, that allowed me to then expand the target and make it bigger. So it started out as like, I do cello for indie folk. And then I was like, oh, strings for indie folk. And then it was like, oh, emotional string arrangements for independent musicians. And now my branding and my conversations are much more just around emotional strings. And it's a question of, does this song need an emotional lift or gut punch that strings can add? If yes, then it's right for me. If no, then I can direct you to another string player that might be a better fit.
Okay, yeah, and that makes a ton of sense. I would love to hear, you know, maybe honing in on that first attempt at being a music producer.
Yeah.
What did at what point in your life, age wise, was that? And then also, what were some like points, looking back in retrospect, points of failure that you see as obvious as the reason that you didn't quite make it?
Yeah. So it was all pretty recent, actually.
Okay.
So when lockdowns hit in 2020, I was a technophobic guitarist and folk musician that had gone into it like an analog studio and made an EP and been a little disillusioned with the process and not quite ended up with the thing that I wanted to end up with. And I couldn't put my finger on why. So when lockdowns hit, I was like, you know what? It's time for me to learn how to use a DAW. I didn't know how to use a DAW. So I downloaded Studio One because they had the best intro package, started learning, and I was like, all right, I have a couple weeks to learn this, and then I'm back out to work. And then like a year passed and I was still inside. And I had built up enough ability to be cranking out demos for myself and producing stuff. I started working with a music business coach who encouraged me to focus on production. I still remember early on a conversation was like, what are the skills you can offer? I'm like, oh, I'm a cellist, I can produce. And he's like, don't worry about the cello, produce. And which is hilarious to me in hindsight, because I remember thinking, oh, that's a unique skill set, but I trust him. But yeah, so I started working, I was working with that coach and trying to figure out how to grow this business. And so it was, I want to say 6 to 9 months of getting on sales calls. First of all, learning how to make content and DM people on Instagram, because that's how I've grown my business. But then converting those conversations and DMs into a Zoom call and then not botching the Zoom call. Each of these was a painful process to learn. But it was months of having great conversations with people and then trying to turn the conversation towards like, let's work together. And they're like, I don't know. Like, oh, I know someone that I work with, or, oh, this and that. And it got to the point where I heard no so many times that it broke me. Like I completely broke down. And I hit the point where I realized something needed to change. And I had seen over the past couple of months of those no's, I was getting, but maybe yes, if strings. And so it was the process of putting myself out there with what I thought would work, getting actual market feedback that no one trusts me as a producer.
Yeah.
And then taking that and learning how to then present something that might work.
No, that's you found that differentiating factor. That was like, yeah. And that having that, I mean, it sucks that, you had to put all the time and effort and like all of the, sales calls and the no's, but you had to go through that to get through to the point where now you're like, well, obviously,
yeah,
I have to do strings and producing. That makes way more sense. Totally.
Like I can now at the top of the podcast be like, oh yeah, boom, 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 clear, straight line.
Yeah.
This is what I do now. It makes total sense. But like, yeah. If it was easy to get to this point, I would have a lot more competition.
Sure.
I am grateful in a weird, twisted way that it is a challenge to do this, because like I now have a lane that I've been able to carve out for myself that is relatively unique.
Weird side tangent question, but you said, and I guess it kind of has to do with where you were just talking about, but you were saying, you hopped on these sales calls, you had to learn how to actually pitch and like sell and like do that part of the process, which I mean, for a lot of people coming from music backgrounds, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't talk to anybody. I sit in a room and I practice for 50 hours a day.
Tell me about it.
So what was the process for you? I mean, because I don't get to ask a lot of people this specific question. What was the process for you of like learning how to speak in a friendly but also sales oriented way? Because I feel like that's really tough for like people getting started.
This is a conversation I love, so stop me if I am getting too in the weeds. There was a couple of years in my early 20s where I quit music entirely and was pursuing podcasting, online business, blogging, that whole thing. So I got really interested in the business aspect of things. I also, around that time, had a job. Have you ever been accosted on the street by someone with a clipboard or more recently an iPad saying, hey, do you have a moment to talk about blah, blah, blah? Okay, that was me.
Oh, man.
I had those jobs for a while. And I'll tell you what, going up to people and trying to talk about it, like Planned Parenthood, about the Nature Conservancy, about like really often polarizing issues, things that people have strong feelings about, and bring money into the conversation. That was such a good learning experience for me. It was fascinating because being on the street, trying to get people to flip to talking about an organization they might not know or care about or hate or love, whatever it is, and then bring their bank account into it. Like, real quick, you have to learn how to not personalize those conversations. So that was one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is I was unbelievably fortunate, while at the same time as trying to grow this business, I was mentoring a kid. I was living up in Seattle at the time. And her mother is a creative business coach, specializing in sales.
Oh, wow.
Like, the firm she works for literally wrote the book on creative sales processes. And I didn't really know this going in, but she handed me a book one day called The Win Without Pitching Manifesto, and changed my life. Unbelievably good book. It's short, maybe like 150 pages or something. You can find it on Amazon, and it is so good. There's too much in there for me to really dissect in this, but the big thing I learned is that for a sale to happen and even be worthwhile down the road, because we've all had the experience of working on a project that you realize when you're too far in isn't working for some reason. So much of that working or not working is set up in the sales process and the conversation and the money and all of that. And so this book really supported me in learning that.
Wow. Okay, that's really. I'm gonna have to check that one out. I've not read that one before.
It's worthwhile. The one thing I think about most frequently that I learned in that book is an idea called the flip, where a potential client, in order for me to even pursue getting them to hire me, I need to be able to see that they perceive me as the person that can help solve their problems. I do not want to be viewed as a commodity in being hired for work. So if someone came to me and said, I need a producer, how about you? Or I need a cellist, how about you? I actually actively try to push them away a little bit. And if in the process of giving a slight pushback and say, I don't know if I'm the right person, what are you actually looking for? If I see them start to perceive me differently and say, oh, maybe this is actually the thing, then I will really engage in that conversation and start to work with potentially pursuing that.
It's a very interesting way to qualify, like, a person rather than form. I mean, I guess you can also do form related qualification, but like having the slight pushback, obviously you don't want to just like straight turn people off to you. So yeah, there's like the balance of learning that where to push and how hard and whatnot. But no, that's a very interesting sales. Dude, that's a very interesting. I'm gonna have to read that book now. You've sold me on that. You sold me on that one. I have it pulled up now. I'm gonna order it when we're done. So that's a really good one. So yeah, and I feel like learning to speak clearly, learning to sell well, learning to do is actually an underrated part of what we do. Business owners. I said it before, right? We are business owners.
We are business owners.
And like, as icky or as weird as that might be to some people, it is just a fact of life. If you want to do this the way that we do this full time, it is your living. You have to approach it that way in order to have the longevity of not just like, I made a handful of $1,000 this month, and I don't know what I'm doing for the rest of the year.
Yeah. And really, like, you touched on something that I feel really strongly about. Like, there is a perception with a lot of people that business is icky. And it can be if you do it in an icky way. But I think that there's nothing inherently icky or wrong or predatory about running a business. Like, I deeply and truly love getting to support people in elevating art that they feel strongly about. And if we resonate and I want to help elevate that, I can't do that for them if I am not able to pay my bills. Like, I am offering something genuinely from my heart, and I want to be able to offer that more often and to more people and get better at doing it. And I need to invest in the tools and time to practice and lessons and all of those things. But I genuinely look at what I do. I'm in the service industry. Yeah. Like, I want to serve people. I want to serve the artist, the producer, the mixing engineer, the mastering engineer, the listener. Yeah. Like, I want to serve the algorithm. I want to serve the streaming platforms, like all of it. Like, we have the opportunity to give something, and I think that's special.
Yeah, that's very, very well said. Very well said. I love the conversation of the business aspect. I would love to maybe put a pin in that, and we'll come back to that a little more in a second.
I told you I can go off on that for a long time.
No, I know. So I'm doing this for my sake too, because I can also talk about it for hours, and that will be this entire episode. Yeah. So I want to. Maybe we'll put a pin in that, like as we get back into some more of the other conversation. If you're enjoying this podcast episode, you might like my newsletter, The Music Maker's Handbook. In this newsletter, I dissect everything from books, podcasts, YouTube videos to bring you insights from people across different creative landscapes. It's also a great way to keep up with me, the Home Studio Hangout podcast, and I'm very excited to be showcasing people from the community's projects as well. You can go to the link in the description or go to musicbydrew.com, my website, and sign up there. Now let's get back to the episode. I would love to talk about more of like, so if you had to now, where you are now, we've kind of gone the, how you got here. Now, what does work life and producing look like for you? So, who's your primary person who would be interested in, talking to you? Give me the sales pitch for you now.
Yeah, totally. So right now, I'll give an example. Yeah. I've been having conversations over the last month or so with a producer in Long Beach. He's in his early 20s, in the process of quitting the jobs he's been working to put that together. And he's taking his home studio full time. He has a stable of clients, and the primary references in his studio right now are, I'm going to butcher the name. I've learned the pronunciation like 4 times, and I always get it mixed up. Noah Kahane? Is it Kahane? Kahan?
It's Khan, I think.
Khan? See. Yeah. So, Noah, we'll just call him Noah.
Yeah, sure.
Lizzie McAlpine, there's some Phoebe Bridgers, that whole like emotional indie folk thing. So I feel like that's the perfect example. So I'm starting to be inducted into his like cinematic universe of session musicians, producers, clients, artists. And I'm having conversations with those folks right now. But that's all around, they're building soundscapes around these really cutting, emotionally potent songs they're writing. And they're like, it's here. I want it to go here. So I love getting to add 10% in that emotion to those productions. I feel like that's where strings, and in particular, like the way I approach strings, can really shine.
So let's touch on that. How would you describe the way that you focus on strings?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll start by talking about the thing that I don't do that made me want to pursue this. So I was listening to a lot of music and hearing strings. Actually, I just posted a reel on my Instagram about like growing up listening to like Dvorak and Shostakovich and Britney Spears. And it, like, I was hearing good composition and classical music and orchestras. I was going to the symphony and hearing all of this stuff. And then I would turn on the radio or a CD, and there would be like a string patch playing whole notes. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, there's got to be a middle ground. And so I went through, for a long time, I was just like, that's dumb. I could do better. And then I was like, how would I actually try? Let's put my money where my mouth is. So the thing I love doing with strings is trying to crawl inside the song to understand what the writing is doing, what the vocal delivery is doing, what the production is doing, and the things that this song at its core wants to communicate with the listener. And then I am most passionate about then taking a step back and thinking, how do I also communicate that with the strings? Sometimes it is that like kind of symphonic whole note thing. Often it's not, more often than not. But so one of the questions that I think is a little more unique to my process, at least from what I've seen, that I will ask clients is, are there any moments that you are trying to express something in the song that you feel like could be highlighted with strings? Because I can go in and figure out the chords. I can figure out like verse, chorus, pre-chorus, bridge. Bridge, you probably want this kind of thing. Chorus, you probably want this kind of thing. Like there's normal boxes to tick. But I love knowing what is the thing that you're trying to express. And so I was just having a conversation 2 days ago with a song that I'm just starting on. And I asked about a lyric that I heard, and I had misheard it. And I thought it said melting strings. And I was like, well, that's an opportunity. But it was actually belts and strings. And it led to a whole conversation about that lyric was about when you are admitted to a mental hospital, they take away belts and strings. And so that was not the conversation I expected. But now I get to sit with the song knowing what is being expressed, layers deep in the metaphor, and being privy to that information, I can think, what is the feeling of being admitted to a mental hospital? Where are you in your life? What are you experiencing? How can I express that in the strings?
And that is going to take you very different places versus these long, lush notes. Yeah. Maybe something you would go for something a lot more erratic in a place and like to lead into like maybe a long, droney thing. But like it's going to affect how you approach that. That's an amazing example.
Yeah, absolutely. So like, I feel like in that example, it's like they say belts and strings, and then there's a beat or two before the next lyric. And so one of the things I'm working on right now is I have a moment where I get the opportunity to try to express that and not get in the way of the vocal. And like, those are the things that get me really fired up about this.
Well, it's also those moments that are, I would say, it's those little moments that, I like to think about things in terms of like the way things are going to perform in other aspects. No, I'm sure you do this as well. Like those are those like clippable moments, right?
Yeah.
That little like belts and strings line goes into that thing could be the thing that sits between them having 500 views on a post and 1.1 million views on a post, because it has this thing that it's just that little extra something, that little extra noise or that little extra thing that catches the ear, and now it's a moment.
Yeah. No, I'm so passionate about that. And I call those musical onomatopoeias. And so often it's like literally like, sometimes it's like plane flying overhead in the lyrics, and I'm like, what would that sound like? Can I like do something weird with panning? Can I like, okay, planes are up in the air. Can I do something weirdly above the normal register of the cello? It's just, it's so fun. It's a game that I get to play with the song while I'm working on it that keeps things fresh.
That's awesome. Are you doing a lot of effects work when you're doing some of the cellos? Are you just giving raw, or is it kind of like a mixture of the two? You're doing like, maybe this is a little more of a effect noise that I heard, take it or leave it, or like, how does that kind of play for you?
Yeah, so it depends on the project. So on a basic structural level, I try to provide a mix of the strings, like the way I'm hearing them, so that someone that doesn't feel like rebalancing and taking it farther can just drop the bus into the track and they'll be good to go. The mixing engineer could kind of sculpt that a little bit. Sometimes there's sub mixes, and I usually do all of that without reverb and then have an isolated reverb send. I've spent a year or two tweaking my reverb settings and like finding what feels right to me that I love tracking and that fits in projects.
Yeah.
So there's all of that. And then I will also send isolated tracks. But in terms of things when I get into weirder experimental sound design, I do send those processed. And kind of assume that if someone's like, that's cool, but I don't like the processing, they'll ask and we can have a conversation about that.
Sure.
But I when I first started doing this, I thought mixing engineers always know best. Like the producer always knows best. But then I started getting the mixes back and I was like, oh, they totally didn't hear what I was hearing. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if I had printed a little bit more of what I was working with, that could have served the song. And maybe not. Maybe they had a different vision and their thing suited the vision better. But that realization, I also heard a string arranger in LA talk about this in an interview once where they were like, oh, this is such a big project. They'll do it right. Here's the rough mix of the strings. Here's all the stems. And then he listened to the track and they just put the rough mix in and he's like, oh no. He's like, I didn't mean for that to happen. And so realizing that like there is a level of trust, even by the mixing engineer, even by the producer, that the thing that I deliver is going to sound the way I hear it in the final product. So I really do try to work towards that. And I've got my template and my processing and submixes and stuff that I run.
And I would say as a producer and mix engineer myself, like I would tend to default to, so the way that I would tend to default to your ear on that because you are the person that I'm bringing in to be specifically knowledgeable about those things. So I personally would probably default to, unless there's like a specific one that I'm like, that's supposed to be a little bit out. That kind of fights and gets in the way of this other thing that we added after the fact that just wasn't in the version that you got. But there was no way you could have known that. But like normally, I would probably just take the bounce and be like, here, that sounds great.
Yeah. And that's why I love giving primarily the dry bus, the dry string mix, and then the isolated reverb mix so that you can like dial that into taste, have a little more control, but it's still the thing that I was hearing.
So as far as instruments, what are you, so you mentioned cello already, and now you're talking strings at large. So maybe like a list of instruments that you are generally working on.
Yeah. So I don't know how much you can see in the frame behind me, but I've got the cello right behind me. That is my primary. That is, I would say 90% of what I use. There's also, it's called an alto violin, which is a fake instrument. It's not in the traditional string family. It's, if you want to dive down this rabbit hole, there's the new string family, the violin octet. It's weird. It's a total rabbit hole that I've been going down. I want them all. It's 8 instruments that fit between violins and violas and cellos and basses, and I'm absolutely obsessed.
You said alto violin, I was like, so a viola? That's what I would have thought of. Yeah.
It's a viola with an end pin that's a little bigger.
Okay.
It's strung exactly like a viola, just a longer scale, and you play it like a cello, which makes me very happy.
Whoa, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. And this one, honestly, is the worst string instrument I've ever heard. The tone is awful. It was made locally like 20 years ago by a hobbyist who doesn't know how to make instruments. Yeah. Like, it's not carved. The whole thing is steam bent. Like, it's coming apart at the seams. There's like a weird like hacksaw mistake on the neck. But I played the thing and I thought, that is so unique, I need it.
Yeah, I have to have it. Yeah.
And the way it fits in a mix, I think is just absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
But the luthier hated it so much that I didn't even buy it. He just loaned it to me and then laughed when I asked how much it would cost. So it's kind of mine.
Okay,
maybe.
Sure.
I'll talk to him at some point.
Yeah. If he wants it back, I guess he can.
Exactly. Yeah. He has my info.
Yeah.
But yeah, so alto violin, I reach for that to kind of fill out the high, mid, throaty. It sounds like I added saturation to make it cut just naturally because it's such a shitty instrument.
That's so cool, though.
I love it to death. Like for percussive parts,
especially
like
on those
chorus.
like Phoebe Bridgers-y, like weird sounding alt stuff. Like that's very, very unique.
I did a project and I had someone ask, "What did you do to that one right there?" Because I was doing like this call and response thing, bouncing around instruments and panning, and they were like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "That is a piece of garbage." But I love it to death.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then I've got a couple violins here as well. And the violin is what I reach for the least because my dirty secret is that I still play it like a cello. I hold it in my lap, or I'll say I play it like a viola da gamba.
You play it up, yeah.
It's a little more sophisticated, but but yeah, I play the violin wrong. And I love the way it sounds. I use it to add high end and shimmer when something calls for that more traditional full orchestral sound. But more recently, I've been reaching for extended range techniques on the cello, like getting up to the end of the fingerboard, and then using a technique called false harmonics, where you fret with your thumb, and then you hold the harmonic. So on the guitar, you have the frets to do it, but on the cello, it's completely dynamic and can be challenging.
I didn't know you could do that on the cello, because I know that you could do the false harmonic. I've learned how to do that myself. It's very cool to add like little chime effects to things and like extend the range of a guitar or like a lead line or something like that. I did not know that you could do that on a cello.
Yeah, so false harmonics on the cello take it up into like proper violin range, but with a really unique timbre. And so that's something that I'm actively playing with and pursuing and figuring out how it works in projects to get that violin range, but with a little less of the violin tonality. It fascinates me, and it like makes me feel all the things.
Yeah, no, that's so cool. That's some of those things that unless you're a person with a hand on a cello essentially 24 hours a day, you're not going to know those things. No. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like also you're, as a producer working with strings specifically, you're probably going to, one, have a lot more hands-on time with it, but you're also probably going to want to try weirder things.
Yeah.
In order to, one, just have a larger tool belt in your, at your disposal, but also as a differentiation technique as for yourself as well. You'd be like, I can do all of these weird and wacky things.
That's the thing.
If you just need me for strings, that's cool. But if you let me just like box open, let me just throw paint at the wall, like I can give you some wacky stuff that'll be super unique.
Whenever someone's like, yeah, don't have like a string section here, but maybe can you do just like a little ear candy? I'm like, yes. I'm like, how do you want it to feel? Let's talk. This is going to be fun.
Dude, one of my favorite parts of, because I do some additional production, like synth-based production, a lot of sound design work on the synthesis side and sample manipulation and stuff. And a lot of my favorite projects with those things are, hey, man, we want you to do some stuff. We don't know what we want, though.
Totally.
So just do some stuff and we'll keep it if we like it. And I was like, all right, sounds good. Sounds
the
great.
Best.
Yeah, it's so fun.
And those conversations for me always center around vibe. It's like, okay, how are you trying to make it feel? Like, what are some weird emotion words that like resonate with this? And I'm like, I don't quite know like what legato and staccato means. I'm like, I barely remember. Don't worry about that. Like, just tell me like, I don't know. Does this make you think about your dad in a weird way? Like, that'll get me where I need to go.
Yeah. And a lot of time for me, it's I'm working with a lot of like heavier bands with the additional production side of things. So it's like I can listen to it and be like, I get the vibe.
Totally.
Let's just like take some synths, print it, reverse it, throw some stuff on it, print that, jump it up an octave, chop it up, slow it down in a spot and make it weird. Yeah.
I'm literally working on some stuff right now where I'm doing that with strings.
Oh, that sounds
like
awesome.
So much fun.
I will request a reel from you showing some of those things. Artist allowed, obviously. But I will request a reel of some of the weirdest string sounds that you've ever made with your stuff.
I'm waiting back for like final mix on this one project, but I did an arrangement and I was like, here, I think this is it. And he's like, okay, great start. The beginning, sorry. He's like, I want the beginning to sound like there's a beached whale. And I'm like, okay.
That sounds so cool.
And I'm trying to remember exactly what I did. Okay, I remember. I took the entire arrangement I did and I bussed it to like a recording track, and I just recorded like a minute, and I went through and found a spot that matched the chords. It was 2 chords in the intro, and so I was like, okay, that's that chord, that's that chord. I grabbed them, I think I stretched them, pitched them down 1 octave or 2 octaves, and then found a 1 measure section, and then duplicated it and reversed it so that it swelled in and out.
Oh,
and
almost like a breath.
It felt like breathing. And I like crossfaded all of these things, and then I like automated the volume to make it feel like growing in intensity. And that's the intro of the song now.
Oh, that's
along
so
with pitched down, like warbly, weird, artifacty strings. But I took 1 lead line and put it on 4 tracks and just offset them by like 2 measures. So it's like cascading entrances with like this beached whale breathing. I was like, this is the craziest thing I've ever done.
That sounds sick. That sounds so awesome.
But like those kinds of projects where it's like, I have this instrument, my upbringing was like, here's how you play this scale. Here's the music theory. Here's this technique. Here's how you sit in a space with people who are silent and listening to you and perform something that was written 300 years ago.
Yeah.
Like that was my upbringing.
It's very same to me. I came up classically. I trained in trumpet, and so horn section on the other side of you on the orchestra pit. So I learned the exact same thing. It's how clean. We're gonna work on performance etiquette, and we're gonna work on clean fingerings, clean tonguings, making sure everything that you do is perfect to the thing that has been written 300 years ago. Like, it's like, all right, I mean, that's cool.
It's beautiful.
And there's awesome things for that.
Yeah.
Less creative sometimes, though.
Yeah. Yeah, so like being able to break away from that as thoroughly as like, instead of being handed sheet music, it's like, you're making a beached whale now. I'm like, great, let's go.
Yeah. No, and I think that's why we get into production, right? Is to make these cool things. Is to make all of this stuff where we can take a string sound, pitch it 2 octaves down, run it through this distortion plugin, and make it and put OTT on it and see how it sounds, just because we can.
It's like, I do that for fun even when people don't ask me. I'm like, I wonder what would happen if that. And I'm like, oh, that was awful. Cool.
Yeah.
Never doing that again.
Never do that again.
But then 1 in 10, 1 in 20 times, you're like, I am doing this on every project.
Yep. Yes. 100%. So getting into, we're kind of talking about it a little bit right now, but let's talk about some of the more like technique based things, or something that you're really stoked on right now. So maybe one of those techniques that you happened upon that you're like, oh man, I'm hype about this. I'm doing this on every project now.
Yeah. So I'm in a really interesting place right now with that. And it's such a cool conversation to be having, because over the course of about 2 years, I grew and refined a template where I would open a project. It would populate with like 80 tracks. Everything would already be pre-bussed and submixed. There would be EQ plugins that were turned off, but I would turn it on, and it would like accentuate the highs or the lows, or carve out some frequencies. So like this kind of sound could sit here, this kind of sound could sit there. And after about 6 months of using that, once I really got it to a place I was excited, I was like, everything I'm doing is kind of sounding the same. I feel like I'm working to the template, and the template isn't necessarily serving me. So I decided to totally blow it up and flip the way I work. And I'm trying some really challenging and weird things right now that for about a month were making me feel completely incompetent at my job, because I would open a project and it would be blank and I would have to reimagine everything. But it was such a good exercise. So one of the things I'm doing right now, jury's out on if I even like it, but the project I've delivered so far that I'm getting good feedback on. So I'm going to experiment with this. But I won an LA 610 on TikTok.
Oh, that's awesome.
Recently. I know. I was kind of blown away. So this is like a $2,000 outboard, like tube channel strip.
It's one of my favorite channel strips. It's got a super, for strings especially, that's actually the channel strip, to be honest.
It's kind of great. Yeah. No, I got it and I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah. It's thick.
But
it's thick.
So I had an AKG 214 in the closet that I had never really used. I just like traded something for it. I wanted to get something out of my studio. This felt like it had more stable resale value. So I was like, great, we'll hang on to that. But I put the 214 through the LA 610 and just like it opened up a world of sparkly clarity that I'd never heard on my cello, which got me so excited. And I've been using almost exclusively the when I bought it, it's badged as the Townsend Labs Sphere L22.
Yeah.
So it's the modeling microphone.
UA rebranded it, when they bought Townsend Labs.
And then changed the plugin and put more DRM on it and locked down some of the use cases that I bought it for. So love that. Thanks, Universal Audio.
Thank you, Universal Audio, for ruining a great microphone. Yeah.
Cool. I can't take it to other studios now. Love this.
Yeah.
But so that is a modeling microphone. And so the thing I'm experimenting with right now that's a little weird, I was running multi-mic, so the 214 and the Sphere together, and like choosing a microphone model and blending that with some settings on the 610, the piece of outboard gear, and trying to craft sounds for projects. And like, oh, I want this one to be boomy. I want this one to be really sparkly. What I'm doing right now is I have buses where I'm just monitoring the bus and doing a submix of the two microphones and recording that to a single track. So it's keeping my sessions more organized and committing me to sounds. So that
you're committing early.
Yeah. And I feel like part of that is I'm reading Behind the Glass right now, which is a book of interviews with producers and engineers. And it came out in 2000. So they're all talking about switching from tape to ADAT, like digital.
And this is pre Pro Tools, I believe.
They're like, they're talking, like, some of them are like, I just got a Pro Tools rig that I'm trying out at home. And I'm just like, this is a piece of history. This is fascinating. But hearing them talk about like the different schools of thought around printing effects and committing to sounds early and like minimizing the work in the mix, it's pushing me to experiment with that. And it's hard, kind of sucks sometimes, and it's really challenging, but there's something so freeing about being like, I think this is going to sound like this. How do I want it to sound? Okay, let's dial this in, quickly test it, listen. Okay, good. And then record it. And like, it's been fascinating. And working with that multi-mic setup instead of just the single mic allows me to really intentionally sculpt sounds too. And once you get into layering those sounds, because a smaller project for me is like 8 tracks. A bigger project can get up to like 50. When you're getting like that, when someone comes to me and they're like, I want this to sound like a symphony behind me, I'm like, awesome, let's do it. But being able to multi-mic, like there's a richness and a texture that is just so beautiful. So I feel like that multi-micing and experimenting with being able to mess with it or printing that submix is the thing that's like really got me in a chokehold right now. And I'm super excited.
It also cleans up the editing process from more of like a logistical standpoint. It just like cleans up the speed of the editing process. Like
honestly,
like by 4 probably.
That was 90% of why I was like, what if I just print these as I'm recording?
Because when I touch up edits, it's all one thing, and I don't have to worry about these groups, and I don't have to worry about everything being in the same place, and it's all just there.
Because then I was like, oh, I'll have more control. But then I'm like, I'm not going to tweak 8 submixes right now. Like, I can, but like they sound good. I'm not going to dive in and find the right sound for one and then duplicate those settings across 8 channels. Like, I'm just like, let me try printing it. And it's been like surprisingly freeing. Even like running plugins on that mix that I'm printing, like that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
But when I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, if I added an outboard EQ and patched that in, I would be recording the EQ on the way in.
It's the same thing. Yeah.
This is a beautiful emulation of an analog EQ, and I love what it does to the sound. What if I just decide that it's going to work?
Yeah.
And print it.
Yeah, you just trusting your ear a lot more. I feel like me and co-host Josh have talked about this a little bit recently of, in the world of plugins coming. So he and I both work in Ableton. Do you still work in Studio One?
I do still work in Studio One.
Okay, so Studio One, fantastic. And there's a lot of Studio One producers that probably actually fall into this same camp, actually, where you're working with samples, you're working with like VST instruments, you're working with these things, and guitars it's big in guitars where it's like, well, yeah, but what if I want to change the amp? Oh, well, yeah, what if I want to change this sound or this sample or whatever? And even just down to like, how mentally freeing it is just to print it and just be done with it. That's a huge aspect of it. But even from a technical science aspect of it, whenever it is audio, you just treat it differently. Whenever it's baked, it interacts with other plugins differently whenever it's printed. Like scientifically, that's just how it works. And then on top of that, you are more willing to do things like, I'm just going to copy this piece over. I'm just going to slide this around. And instead of, I need to meticulously do this tiny little thing, and it's going to take me 5 hours to get this one thing right. And it's not going to matter.
Yeah. And I mean, part of it is like, if I want to be going back to like being of service, like if I want to serve people and deliver things in a timely manner and like hold 10 projects on my plate and be able to move through them. Like I've started to need to find ways of streamlining that workflow. Like everything from like the conversations to the creative ideation to like file delivery and export, like all of it. But being able to just like free the creative thoughts in the moment by just like, let me try committing to that. It's been so much fun.
That's huge. Another thing that, I've personally have been working on lately, very similar to this conversation, is for some reason I've just been really into like bus sends as effects lately. Like instead of taking reverbs and just putting it on a track or taking like effects and putting it on the track, I'm interested in building interesting sends. So like a distortion or reverb and maybe like a flanger or some other weird thing, and I'm making a specific sound for this song or this record or whatever, and that's the thing I'm going to try to use over the course of this. I generally try to do it with like singles or EPs, because sometimes with a record it can get a little convoluted on like the songs being super different. But if it's like a set of singles or an EP, like I'll build a thing where it's like, this is going to be the thing I'm going to try to mess around with during these songs, and it's like some weird combination of like 6 plugins that sound super interesting, and I'll just send stuff to it sometimes, and for like building my own weird combo of outboard gear is kind of how I view it.
Totally. And I do that in my string arranging and some of the production work that I still do. I have one client in particular that I still produce for. He hired me to do strings and then came back to me like 6 months later. He's like, hey, I really liked working with you. Would you produce a song for me? And I was like, no, I don't produce. He's like, just send me your production portfolio. I'll decide. I'm like, I don't have one. And then he's like, I know you've produced stuff. Just send me anything you've produced. And I was like, fine, here. And then he got back to me. He's like, this is exactly what I want. You're producing my song. And I was like, oh.
Okay.
Again, the thing of trying to push someone away. He's like, I'm looking for a producer. I'm like, it's not me, dude.
Yeah. I do these strings things.
Yeah. But now we have like such a good relationship, and I love him to death, and we've done 3 songs together. We're getting ready to start on a 4th. Like, it's so much fun. But the reason I brought that up is I almost always have like 1, 2, or 3 on his songs, like effect sends that I just have an instantiation of Effect Rack from Soundtoys on there. And I'm just like, how about that? Or like,
Yeah.
what about that preset? And I'm like, oh, that's weird. What if I did that thing? Yep. And so much of like the percussion on on those songs is built around, I made like a cello percussion sample pack a while back. And I have it on my email list.
Yeah.
If you're interested, like hit me up, I can send it to you. And it's just like sounds of me hitting the cello in weird ways and doing things. And I love using that as percussion textures in productions.
Yeah.
But I'll basically bus all of that and send it to just like the wildest like series of delays and like
devil lock.
Mangling, like devil lock into Decapitator, into like PsyQ. Just like, it's nuts. And I love it so much. And it just creates this like gritty texture and like vibe that makes the song come together.
If you're doing that, something that's really random that I learned recently is using something like if you've ever used Kickstart. Do you know Kickstart? It's a plugin. So you should check it out. It's really cool. It's a side chaining plugin. It's really big in EDM. It's basically just like one of the most malleable side chaining plugins. But if you have a song that's, you know, maybe traditionally 4 on the floor, you know, you have this nice 4 on the floor, using that to put on your percussion instruments and don't 100% it, like find somewhere in like the 40% thing, it makes your percussion instruments almost do like this nice wavy thing. It's so like thinking I can see your brain thinking about it. Yeah, it's very, very cool. And you can put stuff after it, like delays that will catch the coming in, and then it'll do so it almost like acts as like a weird delay throw thing that you don't have to automate.
Oh dude, that's so exciting. See, I love this stuff.
Yeah, it's very, 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 very interesting. Shout out to my buddy Seth, Velvet Year at Velvet Year on YouTube for coming up with that one.
Oh yeah, love that guy. Seth is the best. I feel like I just scroll Seth's page when I'm like, I need something totally different to inspire me, and I'm I've never seen that before.
That sounds cool. I use Kickstart all the time on like hip hop stuff. It's really good for side chaining kicks to 808s and things, but using it in a percussion context, I was like, that's a really good idea. I'm gonna steal that one, Seth.
The other context that I use an effects end in more regularly, and this one's like super common, but my reverb. So I like that. I send all of my strings to that, and I'm able to balance the level and panning in those sends.
There's something beautiful about bust reverbs.
Oh yeah. So you can see, if you're watching the video of this, you can see I'm in a padded cell. Like like I've got the clouds above me. There's bass traps in like every corner. I'm in a 10 by 12 box, which is literally the worst thing you can do for recording. And an instrument like a cello that wants to sing and breathe and take up space, like there's no worse circumstances I could be recording in. I don't know if you can hear the leaf blower outside my window right now either. Like it's Wednesday's leaf blower day. Not recording.
But we don't record at the content day. That's not the recording day.
The padded cell syndrome. I'm gonna have to remember that. I've never said that before, but I like it. The padded cell syndrome in recording. All of my tracks are so dry, so dry, and I've come to love that because it allows so much control, and there's so much texture and detail that you pick up. Because I have to be close miking. There's room mic is not going to sound pretty in here. But when I take that dry signal and send them out to, right now I'm using a combination of 2 different impulse responses in a dual convolution reverb. I think I used convolution.
Correctly. That's correct.
It's the impulse response.
That's correct.
But so I'm using like a studio and a hall and blending those to taste. But having a starting point that I know I love, and then finding that sweet spot and really developing the character that fits with the song, like that's like the perfect use case for an effects end, and the classic boring one. But I love it to death.
But I will say, one, from a CPU hog perspective, it's way lighter just to send it, and also if you know you're going to use it, and You might as well. And I will say for strings also, you want them to sound like they're coming from the same room. Mm-hmm. I would assume, generally speaking, as a generality, obviously. Mm-hmm. You would want them to sound like they're coming from the same room. So having it go to a send will simulate the idea of them coming from the same room anyway.
Yeah.
I've had to do that on live records recently where like they didn't have a good like room mic, or like the room mic was just like a little too close or a little too subby or was peaking or something like that. And you can do that and like have these, you could bust literally everything to a room mic and then like rebalance it and create like a fake room sound doing that as well.
I'm doing that with gang vocals on a production right now that were tracked in different ways for friends all over the world. Like, I'm like, okay, I need to put them in a space now because this sounds insane.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. If people want to find you, where can they find you?
Good question. Okay, you can go to my website, harleyeblen.com. That's Harley like the motorcycle, EBLEN.com. You can shoot me an email, harley@harleyeblen.com, or get in touch with me on Instagram. My handle is Harley Eblen. So if you see the name of the show, my name is probably in it. My name everywhere.
Yeah, beautiful. And all links will be also in the description. I'll make sure to link to the website, to your Instagram. If you want to send me the link to your newsletter, I will also drop it in there for those that might be interested in that. Harley, thanks for this super interesting and very informative conversation. It's been a while since I've been able to nerd out quite this much.
Well, thank you. I love getting to have conversations like these.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back on to do another one at some point whenever we can nerd out about maybe something else.
Absolutely, I would love that.
All right, and listeners, thank you so much for listening or watching. Go follow Harley on the socials and whatnot, and we will see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast. If you could take the time to like, subscribe. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other audio platform, go ahead and make sure you're subscribed, and also leave a rating and a review. It helps the show get out to new people, and we're trying to grow every single week. Once again, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast, and we'll see you next week.